In 1931, Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, famously claimed that we are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years. Either we do it, or they will crush us. 10 years later, in 1941, the Soviet Union was illegally attacked by Germany and its allies. This wouldn't be the end of the Soviet Union, however, as only 4 years later, the Soviet flag would be hanging over the Reichstag, signaling the end of Nazi terror in Europe. World War II officially started upon the German invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939. Yet, what many people don't know are the special relations that the Soviet Union had with Nazi Germany up until 1941. From countries who were, by all means, ideological opposites, how could these special relations manifest themselves? What were the motivations for them, and what did it entail? During mid-1939, tensions had become sky high in Europe. In early 1938, Hitler annexed Austria in a sham referendum with little protest from Western powers. In September of the same year, Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, met with Adolf Hitler in Germany to sign the infamous Munich Agreement, which allowed Hitler to take the Sudetenland, and further, all of Czechoslovakia, with Poland taking Zaujie and Javornia. Seeing as Poland was the obvious next target for Germany, Britain gave a unilateral guarantee to defend Poland against aggression in March. On April 15th, Britain made an approach to the Soviet government and suggested that it should issue a declaration offering military assistance to any state bordering the Soviet Union on the off chance they faced aggression of any kind. 2 days later, the Soviet Union responded and said that it would not consider a unilateral guarantee, citing inequality with the other powers concerned. Instead, it proposed that a trilateral mutual assistance treaty be established between these states. On the 27th of May, the British and French replied to the Soviet Union with a draft of the Tripartite Pact. In a letter to his sister, Chamberlain commented on the draft and said that, in substance, it gives the Russians what they want, but in form and presentation, it avoids the idea of an alliance and substitutes declaration of intention. It is really a most ingenious idea. Earlier that month, Maxim Litvinov, the Soviet negotiator, had been replaced by Vyacheslav Molotov. Molotov quickly pointed out that, in the draft, in the event of hostilities, there would be no immediate mutual assistance but, quote, consultation through the League of Nations, a supranational organization similar to the United Nations. After reading the draft, he claimed that it was poorly compatible with the demand for the effectiveness of the mutual assistance. On June 2nd, the Soviet Union submitted a counter-draft addressing these problems. However, the British and French governments responded by saying the Baltic states and Finland refused to be guaranteed. In response to this, the Soviet government suggested that it drop the Baltic states and Finland for the time being, and asked that an agreement between the three powers of mutual assistance to each other should be signed as soon as possible, which was a major concession for them. However, the Western allies denied this, which showed that they weren't interested in the early conclusion of negotiations and an agreement. Yet the Soviet Union continued to insist that a military convention be signed at the same time as a political treaty, so that there would be no possibility of any vagueness in it. In mid-July, Molotov said that there was no point in discussions until the military convention was concluded. On the 23rd, the British and French finally agreed to begin military discussions. From there, they sent a delegation whose head was British Admiral Drax to Leningrad. Additionally, Drax admitted they had no powers to sign a pact, only to, quote, negotiate. In further discussions, the Soviet Party made it excessively clear to the British and French that any military agreement would involve Red Army soldiers moving through Polish territory in order to fight the Germans. With this in mind, French Foreign Minister Bonnet makes clear to the French ambassador to Poland, Noel, that the Poles agreeing to allow Soviet troops to cross Polish territory to engage the Germans was essential for any collective security agreement. However, in a telegram between Polish Foreign Minister Joseph Beck and Polish ambassador to France Juliusz Lukasiewicz, Beck declared that Poland refused to sign any military agreement with the Soviet Union, which sabotaged any further attempts at a Tripartite Pact. It's lucky that, for this reason, the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact was signed later that month. This was a definite turn in Soviet negotiations. Seeing as how negotiations with the Allies were now useless, the Soviet Union turned to the Germans as a last resort and signed the treaty with them on August 23, 1939. This pact, commonly referred to as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, is commonly shrouded in myths and falsifications about what it entailed. In summary, the pact states that no party will act aggressively toward one another for a period of 10 years. In 1946, a secret additional protocol was found to the pact. This portion divided up Eastern Europe into Soviet and German spheres of influence along this map. This spheres of influence boundary was along the northern border of Lithuania, cut down the middle of Poland into Bessarabia. Many people seem to think that the spheres of influence directly referenced invading the specified countries, but primary sources heavily challenge this notion. On September 7th, Franz Halder, German chief of the General Staff of the German Army, wrote in his war diary, 3 possibilities the situation may develop. Poland comes to negotiations. Hitler is ready for negotiations. Poland must separate from Britain and France. A residual Poland is recognized. Narów to Warsaw to Poland. Industrial zone to us. Krakow to Poland. The northern edge of the Beskidov Mountains to us. Ukraine is independent. So Hitler considered independence for the Polish part of Ukraine, although according to the spheres of influence, Ukraine lay in the Soviet sphere of influence. There would be no reason to consider such a thing if the spheres of influence was truly about the invasion or the annexation of the regions listed in the pact. In further entries by Halder on the 9th and 10th, he repeats that the German command is discussing the matter of an independent Ukraine. On the 12th, he noted that Russians believed that the negotiated settlement would leave a residual Poland in existence, which is further evidence. On September 17th, Soviet Deputy Foreign Minister Vladimir Potemkin handed a note to Polish Ambassador Zhivovsky stating that the Polish government had collapsed and treaties thereby ceased to operate. This statement, if true, would be beneficial for the Soviet Union as it would justify the claim of neutrality regarding its immediate intervention in Poland. But does it hold up? During mid-September, many Polish ministers and government officials fled into neighboring Romania, thereby abandoning their governmental responsibilities. Romania was a neutral power in the war, and by crossing over, the Polish government became in turn. Recognizing the Polish government in Romania would therefore be a violation of Romanian neutrality and a hostile act toward Hitler, which was unfavorable for Romania. So it can be argued that the Polish government ceased to exist by this time. Even Motskitsky, the Polish president, and the Romanian government tacitly admitted this. This was because Romania realized that Motskitsky was lying when he claimed he legally resigned on the 30th, so they fabricated a story that Motskitsky had resigned on the 15th just before entering internment, but he himself never made this claim. Romania needed to fabricate the date of resignation as resignation is an official act, and since Motskitsky could no longer function as president of Poland from September 17th onward, he couldn't do so in Romania. Furthermore, every country on Earth agreed the Soviet Union was neutral when it intervened in Poland. We know this because France never declared war on the Soviet Union, although they had a mutual defense treaty with Poland. Great Britain never demanded the Soviet Union withdraw troops from the areas it occupied. In fact, it stated that it shouldn't be part of a future Polish state, and the government in exile actually agreed with them. The Soviet Union was in the League of Nations, and the covenant required its members to take sanctions and break ties with those who resorted to war, but no such actions occurred against the Soviet Union. With regard to international law, UCLA professor Ginsbergs also came to the same conclusion that the Soviet claim that Eastern Galicia was in fact a terra nullius may not be unjustified and could be sustained. An immediate consequence and a notable feature about the pact was that it allowed for Germany to avoid a two-front war, unlike World War I, where it had to manage two fronts simultaneously. Hitler wanted to avoid a two-front war at any cost, even if it meant striking a deal with its biggest ideological opponent. Most of the effects of the pact were long-term. Stalin, in a speech given during the invasion of the Soviet Union, had this to say in the pact. He said that we secured our country peace for a year and a half, and the opportunity of preparing its forces to repulse fascist Germany should she risk an attack on our country despite the pact. Furthermore, the pact also influenced the borders of Eastern Europe to this day. Looking at 3 maps, 1941, 1981, and 2021, you'll see that most of these countries, or countries to be, haven't displayed much change from the 1941 borders. In conclusion, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact can be classified as a turning point for 2 reasons. 1. Represented a shift in Soviet interest from establishing collective security with Britain and France to ultimately establishing a non-aggression pact with the Nazis. 2. Represented a turning point in Nazi-Soviet relations. Though they weren't allies by any means, they more or less tolerated one another until 1941 compared to before 1939. The impact of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is not one to be understated. At first, it was born out of necessity, but ended up in betrayal, a timeless tale of history.